The first time I walked off a stage in New York, I didn't walk so much as stagger, blind in the blue haze of stage lights and humiliation. My mouth tasted like dry copper. Behind me, the last polite claps had already faded. I could hardly hear the thin, careful voice of the host as he thanked our next hopeful and spun his chair to face someone newer, shinier. It was a charity event, really, an open-floored pitch night at a renovated Harlem theater. Young Visionaries Night, they called it, as if any of us went back far enough to remember being that. My violin case felt heavier than it ever had when I shuffled past the wings. I could feel the jagged edge of the investor's voice chasing me, uncertain market, lack of scalability, who attends orchestras these days. Tell us about innovation, not nostalgia. I hadn't slept for 2 days, dreaming up charts and numbers to prove that classical music could be more than background noise for a dying breed. But those men and women in black and navy blue suits looked at me like I'd just pitched chamber music in a subway with an empty coffee cup. It was no different than growing up in Bensonhurst, only now the skepticism was sharper, like glass instead of gravel. When I called my mother after, her first question wasn't, "How did it go?" but, "Did you tell them you went to Juilliard? Maybe if you said that first, they'd have listened a bit more." I said nothing. She only sighed, her doubt soft as a pillow pressed to my face. She tried gently sometimes, convinced it was a phase I'd grow out of if I just realized adult life wasn't all cello and chop-in dreams. She'd pulled that phrase from my father, who had said it with a smirk the first time I came home from a conservatory open day at 15. Afterward, I wandered in the cold, haunted by the echo of that man's voice. Who attends orchestras these days? The city lights looked smeared behind the beginnings of tears. I practiced harder, sank deeper into the subway beneath Manhattan, busking until my fingers numbed or someone spat into my case. Sometimes I met other musicians, old men with bruised knuckles, a cellist from Ukraine who played with her eyes closed, kids looping batch through amps. We belonged to each other on those cracked platforms, but not above. Upstairs, I was the failed investment, the punchline at family dinners. "And Nico, how many millions you raised this week, eh?" The uncles laughed and reached for bread, winking at each other over the table. It strung more because part of me believed them. Maybe they were right. It was winter when I moved into a friend's windowless apartment in Prospect Heights, the kitchen packed high with empty bottles and bowls slick with last week's ramen. There was talk of giving in, taking the school teaching post my cousin's husband offered, the safe job, giving my mother something to brag about when she had her coffee friends over. But whenever I thought about standing in front of a chalkboard, reducing T. Tchaikovsky to textbook formulas, I couldn't breathe, so I didn't call back. I started playing for the smaller houses. Open mics in Brooklyn where no one cared if it's Batch or Billie Eilish, little restaurants where the owner pressed extra tips into my palm after closing, sometimes a children's class after hours. I learned to play coffee shops until my wrists sang with cramps, learned to accept tiny gigs without pride. I played for strangers on street corners, watched as some stopped and listened, eyes full of longing I recognized. The same hunger gnawed at me at night in that half-lit room. Late at night, I recorded videos. I played everything Paganini, old Greek lullabies, Gershwin. I posted them online, fighting the urge to turn off the comments. People shared. Not everyone liked that a classical violinist was playing Summertime next to an alley dumpster, but someone sent a message from Seattle, another from Senegal. There was hope there in those midnight messages, small at first, like a timid animal sniffing at my hand. After almost a year of hustling, recordings, and lessons, I got an email. A music director for a small off-Broadway theater had seen a clip of me playing Debussy in the Rain, wanted to talk about a string ensemble for their new adaptation of Antigone. Money was tight, but it was stage work. Grind or not, I'd promised myself I'd never decline that. I said yes. That rehearsal was the first time in years no one looked at me with pity or exasperation. My heart hammered while they handed me a score. It wasn't glamorous, 5 musicians squeezed on a stage with peeling black paint, swaddled in blankets between sets, but in the weeks that followed, word of mouth built. The director's sister knew a film editor who brought a friend from a streaming service, who in turn was dating a music teacher desperate for new talent to show her kids. Soon, I'd played more in 6 months than in the last 2 years. I never heard much from my family during that season. My father worked nights now, my mother sent habitual texts. "Hope you eat, remember shoes for Easter," that sort of thing. She didn't talk about my work, but she kept asking when I'd make time to call home. I put her off, waiting for the kind of good news I could really bring back. By the end of the second year, the play transferred to a larger venue. Someone in the City Arts Council liked what we did and made introductions. I began building an ensemble, young musicians hungry for stages, for someone to believe in them. We played schools, small neighborhood concert halls, even old churches. I called it the Bridge Collective, thinking of how we all tried to reach from here to there, from the subway to the stage. Eventually, the right person, a gentle, bespectacled agent, came to a show on a drizzly April Friday. She talked quietly, not with money in her tone, but genuine curiosity. "Classical music needs faces like yours," she said, touching my arm after we'd played. "Let's work together, there's something here." The next spring, the Bridge had grant money for a citywide tour. I sent the occasional update home. My sisters replied first, still living near Coney Island, telling me they saw my face in the newsletter for the Manhattan School of Music. "Ma showed the deli owner," my younger sister wrote. "Doesn't really get what you do, but she says you're out there with the high class. Dad told everyone you played with foreign embassies." A small, sharp relief filled me, but there was still a gap, awaiting for true recognition. The East Coast tour was booked for the next summer, Baltimore, D.C., Boston, but the most important date was the last. Brooklyn City Hall, a public show in the square sponsored by the Arts Council and the city. It rained all week. My mother called twice, asked if I had a coat, a real one, not your musician thing. I told her it would be fine, and for the first time she said, "Maybe we'll come, some friends too. If it's not too much trouble." The night of the concert, the rain stopped. All of Brooklyn seemed slicked in silver and yellow from the late sun breaking through clouds. Across the plaza, the amphitheater steps filled slowly, old women in shawls, teenagers in plastic sneakers, city workers in construction dust. I stood at the back, hands aching with nerves. My ensemble was already in place. Lewis, the wild-haired cellist, Evie, her fingers always trembling until the music started. Aram, the drummer who'd gotten in trouble for painting graffiti on the school gym but played Schubert like a prayer. My mother arrived 15 minutes late, my sisters behind her. My father kept a hat low over his hair and nodded once at me, as if I were just another subway busker in his way. 3 neighbors stood with them, and I saw my old music teacher, the one who had dared smile at my first trembling violin notes, hovering on the edge of the crowd. The square filled thicker and thicker. By dusk, the crowd pressed in, hundreds where I'd been lucky to get 30 in the subway tunnels. A city arts official introduced us, reading from a card. "Homegrown talent," she said, "born and raised in Brooklyn, now leading one of New York's most exciting young ensembles." The words whirled in my ears. Before stepping out, I glanced at my mother. Her lips were pressed tight, face cautious as if afraid to hope. We played Dvorak to open, the American, the sounds bold and bright, a surge of joy I hadn't realized I'd held back. Halfway in, Lewis grinned at me. The cellos below him rumbled like an oncoming train, and under the sweep of bows, the music soared above the city noise. Even in the open air, our sound curled around the square, drawing in the old men dozing by the benches, the little kids heel-tapping on their fathers' knees. We played Gershwin and Piazzolla, a new piece I'd written that wove in a Greek folk melody for my parents and a bit of Satie for those subway nights. With every note, people leaned closer, the kind of silence that is not emptiness but attention. After the final movement, applause spilled through the square, strong, loud, insistent. I could see my father clapping, uncertain, then more fervently. My mother's fingers curled around her bag strap, knuckles white, but her eyes were wet. My sisters cheered, catching the rhythm, drawing their friends and neighbors in until the whole corner hammered with noise. After the bows, people clustered by the stage. Reporters asked about our next project. One of the sponsors shook my hand, pressing a card into my palm. I glimpsed my old uncles off to the side, eyebrows raised. Soon my neighborhood would know. But it was later, after the crowd dispersed and volunteers packed up music stands, that the proof arrived. We just stepped off stage when a neighbor, Mrs. Calodras, famous for her gossip and for always quietly dismissing my musical flights of fancy, approached my mother. She was breathless, carrying a poster with my face and the Bridge's name. "Nico's on the city's Facebook page already," she crowed, shoving her phone into my mother's hands. The press release described me as a leading light in reimagining classical music for a new generation. My mother looked at the screen, then at me, as if seeing my face for the first time. She pressed the phone to her chest but said nothing. Across the square, more friends from church crowded in, congratulating her, clapping my father on the back. Everyone wanted a piece, a story to tell about our Nico. Then, with slow ceremony, my father drew me aside. The city skyline glistened behind him, lights shimmering like a string of pearls. He stared at me for a long moment, then reached out and clasped my shoulder, firm like he used to when I was a child. "You did it," he said. "You brought them here, kid, made us proud." I felt in that moment the weight lift. All the years of small dismissals, bemused laughter, behind-the-back jokes about chasing wind instead of money, they faded, smoothed away like an old score worn thin by practice. The proof was real, the crowd, the stage, the ringing in my ears. The city itself had spoken. My strange, impractical dream was alive and shared now with everyone who had once claimed it was hopeless. I walked home alone, violin case swinging softly at my side. The night was cool and the city's noise hugged me close. For the first time, every neon sign, every crumbling brownstone, every woman or man sitting on stoops in the late dusk seemed to know me, and I finally them. When I reached my parents' building, the hall light flickered above where my mother waited, her coat drawn up against the wind. She did not open her arms nor scold, but only smiled, a quiet, tremulous thing. "Come up for tea," she said. "Everyone's already talking about you." I followed her upstairs, listening to the murmurs behind each door. I placed my violin beside the family portraits on the shelf. For the first time in years, I belonged in that photograph, in the line of faces shaped by hope and stubbornness, by the unwelcome dreams that, once upon a time, no one dared believe could come true.